Hi, I'm Melanie Ehren. I'm a reader at the Institute of Education, and I have the pleasure to talk today to Matthew Purves, who is a head of education reform at England's Inspectorate of Education, Ofsted. Now, a big change we have also seen is this notion of a self-improving system where schools are increasingly collaborating in both formal and informal partnerships. The goal of it being to kind of enhance improvement of schools and make sure that they're not working as isolated kind of entities. We would see teaching school alliances, for example, who share professional development, a range of formal networks such as multi-academy trusts, federations. Obviously, this has implications for Ofsted, as so much of how they would define quality, how they would work on improvement is now set within a network.
Yeah.
What are some of the ways that Ofsted tries to deal with this?
Well, first of all, I'd want to say that the Chief Inspector has been very positive about clusters or groups of schools working together. There was a speech he gave to the CBI last year where he talked about the benefits of clusters, including, for example, university technical colleges alongside other kinds of schools, and having a mixture of vocational and academic options within that cluster. So overall really positive about it. In terms of our duty to inspect, we are looking at the outcomes for the children in that school and the things that lead to those outcomes taking place. So we need to look at the quality of leadership and management, the effectiveness of teaching, learning and assessment, the children's personal development, behaviour and welfare, and their outcomes.
Yeah, that will be in individual schools.
And we primarily do that in individual schools. But there are networks that support that. So our primary inspection is built around those individual schools. But we also look at, for example, local authorities' school improvement systems, and we also visit or sample the schools and multi-academy trusts and write to the multi-academy trusts about what we've found when we've been there. And the kinds of things that we put in our letters when we've made those visits is that we report on the sharpness, for example, of the local authorities' ability to spot schools that are struggling, schools that they're responsible for, maintain schools that are struggling, or those schools that, for example, are wobbling on the borderline of good and requires improvement. Because often we find that local authorities or others don't have arrangements in place to spot them early and provide them with the support they need. So it's all built around the education of the children in the school, but it's about what support do the local authorities or the academy chain give to drive improvement.
Right, so the support that individual schools within that network receive is now part of the framework, or is that, how does that tie into the inspection framework?
Yeah, so we have a specific document, a framework for the inspection of local authorities' school improvement. So we would select a local authority based on our regional intelligence, maybe one where things are going really well, but more usually one where we think there may be issues. And then we would visit a sample of schools within that local authority. We would survey others, and then we'd visit the school improvement arm of the local authority, interview really thoroughly the different members involved with that and the senior leaders, and then reach a set of conclusions about the support that they provide, and whether they have a grip and an understanding on what's happening in the schools for which they're responsible.
Okay, so talk to me about the Multi-Academy Trust.
Yes, of course.
That is a network of schools that is in the rise, so to say.
Absolutely, yes.
And I've seen examples of focused inspections as a new way of inspecting networks of schools. Can you tell me a little bit about how that would look like?
Yes, so that's rather as I've just described for the local authorities. It's less formal, we don't have a framework around that, but we would follow the same approach. So we would we would inspect a number of schools in that chain or multi-academy trust. We'd survey the others, and we'd visit the school improvement arm of the multi-academy trust and draw our conclusions about the support that they're providing and whether they have an understanding and a grip on the standard of education and safeguarding being provided in those institutions.
Right.
So it's about the support that they provide to the schools and their network to deliver the best possible outcomes for children and learners.
Right. So what would trigger a focused inspection? Is that something that you would schedule for all the multi-academy trusts, or?
Yes, so that's a great question, and certainly at the moment that's not our strategy. So we select a small number every year that our risk assessment and our intelligence suggests requires a visit. So we've visited a number of high-profile multi-academy trusts in the past. EACT, there was recently a visit to the Oasis Academy chain, and that's because we thought there were specific areas that we might need to follow up. And in the case of EACT, we weren't the only organisation taking action in that space, and a number of things have happened as a result of our inspection and what others in government have seen.
Right. So why would these be high profile? What did you see specific risks in these multi-academy trusts that sparked a focused inspection?
Yes. So we, as I've said, we always start from the outcomes for the children and the learners in the schools, and definitely a dip or a failure to rise in the outcomes for those children suggests to us that a visit might be required. But there's not only that. Through our regional structure, we have a lot of local intelligence about what's happening in the individual schools. And also inevitably we'll inspect individual schools within that academy chain, and we might begin to see a pattern of concerns. And for that reason we might draw that together and visit the multi-academy trust.
Right. So a focused inspection would lead to a letter that would highlight strengths and weaknesses of schools across the trust.
Yeah.
What would some of the other topics be that will be covered in the letter? Or can you give an example of the kind of what that letter would look like?
Yes, of course, and they're available on the Ofsted website for those kind of using the course to see. But it's really as you've described it. So it would describe what we've done, the number of schools that the multi-academy trust looks after, the sample within that we have visited or surveyed, and then draw out common themes across those schools and across the support that's provided. So it's those key things. Do the leaders of the multi-academy trust understand where the strengths and weaknesses are? Are the best leaders in the multi-academy trust being deployed to support other leaders and drive an improvement in quality? Is the network sufficiently strong so that all aspects of the multi-academy trust are receiving support to improve, or are there parts of it where actually they're behind other parts? And increasingly with multi-academy trusts that are cross-phase, it's really interesting to look at the different kinds of academies within there and whether they're all progressing at an equal pace.
Yeah. So what happens with that letter? Is there a follow-up to it in terms of inspections? The regional school commissioners, do they have a role in following up on what's in the letter?
Yes. So the letter itself stands. It doesn't in itself make an inspection judgment on the multi-academy trust. It simply points out strengths and weaknesses, as you said earlier. And then what tends to happen is that the Regional Schools Commissioner or the Department for Education or others might contact the Multi-Academy Trust and take action on specific issues with them. But usually, of course, this is a letter to the head of the Multi-Academy Trust, the Chief Executive, or whoever it may be, and often they will take action in response to what's been found. So there isn't a formal programme of inspection follow-up in response to a focused inspection. It's very much as adding to what we do in our individual inspection of schools.
Yeah. So why is that? What's your explanation for the fact that there is no kind of framework or formal follow-up to inspections of multi-academy trusts? Is there no legislation that would allow you to inspect multi-academy trusts, for example?
So the legislation that Ofsted operates under, particularly the 2005 legislation, is based around the assumption that we will inspect individual schools and providers. So that's very much the legal framework that we operate under. the way the law is written, there's nothing that stops us visiting, be it a local authority or a multi-academy trust in that way, anyone responsible for a group of schools. But there isn't specific legislation that either empowers us or prevents us from conducting that inspection. And very much our view at the moment is that we are visiting these groups of schools, providing our findings, and they usually prompt action. So it's not the case at the moment that we feel we need a specific legislative tool in order to make us do the job. Okay,
right. So how about other types of networks? There are so many different types of networks, and we've been talking about multi-academy trusts primarily, but there are also federations, there are also more informal types of networks like teaching school alliances, schools working around peer reviews. What's the provision for those type of networks?
Well, I'm glad you asked me about that, because this has actually been something close to the Chief Inspector's heart. He is really interested in recognising the exceptional leaders all the way across our system who are supporting other schools in more informal ways. So when we announced the new framework, the Chief Inspector also made a point of saying that we will be looking for exceptional leaders across the country who are supporting other schools to improve on an informal basis, not through a structure like a multi-academy trust. And so this term, Ofsted inspectors and HMI are going to be going out looking for that support. So when they see a school that's improved quickly, they'll be asking what support they've received from outside the school. And where it's been another head is given of their time to do that. They'll recognise that, they'll feed that into the region, and then we'll potentially recognise the head that's provided the support as an exceptional leader. So we really want to draw focus onto that informal network of support, and those exceptional leaders who are out there often working unseen and driving improvement in the system. And so we're hoping that our focus on that over the coming years will really bring that into the public view. Yeah,
but do you perhaps also see focused inspections to be extended to other types of networks in the future?
So I don't currently foresee that, and I don't think we have any plans to do that at present as Ofsted. I mean, one of the things you may be hinting at in the question is you mentioned the kind of emergence of the self-improving system. And peer inspection is a really interesting thing that's emerging all across the country, and there are all sorts of organisations that are doing that. And a lot of people are reflecting on the role that has on the future system, and particularly for good and outstanding schools. And I think we're watching that debate with interest, but at present we don't have any plans to move more in that direction.
So can you then perhaps explain why focused inspections are on multi-academy trusts only? What's the rationale for that decision?
Well, they're not. So a focused inspection is very much the equivalent of a local authority school improvement inspection. Why is that? Well, that's because the local authority has responsibility for the maintained schools in its area. And the multi-academy trust has responsibility for the educational standards in the schools in its trust. So we are following the responsibility, the levers of power, and reporting on that, because that has the potential to drive action to be taken. The more informal networks that are out there don't have the benefit of that clarity, and so we're not inspecting in the same way. But you did mention federations, and where schools are in a hard federation, we would inspect them as a unit, because again, that authority is there, so Ofsted can report on and to a particular set of people to drive improvement through inspection.
So as long as there is a formal agreement or structure underpinning a network, then that would be a kind of an incentive to do focused inspections, I guess. Is that a good?
I think that's a fair way of summarising what I've just said.
Thank you. Thank you
Melanie.
for your time.
Yes, of course.
That's it.